Welcome to The Ripple, where extraordinary women executives get real about their career journeys. This season, thanks to our partnership with GNW Consulting, you'll hear even more stories from women leaders about how they're building visibility for themselves, their careers, and their companies. I'm your host, Ashley Laabs, and today we're joined by the reflective Katie Swett Miller. She's the VP of Product at Kit and previously head of product at Square. She's here to share the value of building an authentic personal brand inside the company. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really glad to be talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashley. I'm excited to be here.
I would love to start by just giving people some context about what visibility has meant in your career and the difference that it's made for you.
It's such an important topic, I think, especially for women, feeling comfortable to show up and be yourself and really understand, like, who am I? How am I showing up? How are people receiving me? And so visibility had been really important, I think, in my career journey, and honestly in what I think has probably contributed to a lot of my success or my ability to continue to get more and more opportunity is to show up and to have conversations and to engage and to say yes and to try new things. And so I think it's really, really crucial.
One of the interesting things we had talked about before was the difference between internal visibility and external visibility, like in your company versus in your industry. How has that played out for you?
I mean, there's this internal exercise I think every person goes through when they start working, which is like, who am I in my personal life? And then who am I in my work life? I got a lot of kind of opportunity early on, which put me in this imposter syndrome place where, you're questioning, you've got this opportunity in front of you. It's really exciting. You don't want to mess it up. It feels high pressure. And so when you feel high pressure, you feel like you have to be perfect. And so I don't know if others have gone through this or if you've gone through this, but with that balance, really thinking through, like, how do I want to show up? And I think for me, it started off with a little bit of that, focusing on the performance of it. Like, okay, I'm showing up, I'm saying the right words, I'm doing the right things, but it doesn't feel like me. And going to work doesn't feel natural. Having conversations with these people maybe doesn't feel natural because you're in a position of authority. And so internally, I think one thing that I realized really early was that I felt more comfortable showing up as myself. And the more that I showed up as myself, the more that my team showed up as themselves, and the more that other people showed up as themselves. And given how much we show up and how much of our time we spend at work, I think it's so important to, one, just make sure you enjoy your work, but two, the results of actually like showing up as yourself really like authentically show up, I think, in the results of how your team can operate and feel like they can be themselves when they come to work and share what's truly challenging them and like what's on their plate and how they're feeling. And so internally, I felt like for managing a team, it's been so important to be really vulnerable and show up as who you are. And that's created a ton of opportunity too, because the more questions you ask, the less you're nervous to show up perfect, the more people view you as engaged, and then the more opportunities you get. I've actually felt like that's a hidden superpower where many are trying to show up being perfect and being corporate. I've always been a little bit more casual and originally was a little bit scared of that because, I think I worked at IBM, which is a big company, like a long time ago. And that's just a very polished, like, you wear a suit and you show up to the client. And,
Very
you don't want to
traditional.
be, yeah, very traditional. But I always felt like being able to connect with people by being myself was where I saw the real results. And so internally, that's been huge. And then over time, I think externally, the same has come true where you can show up. Everyone can post the LinkedIn post that's like, here's the 3 things that you must do to succeed. And those are great. I love to see those. But I actually think when I go on LinkedIn, I want to connect with people and see like real people that are going through real things and are showing up with real challenges. And so I've just found it to be so core to being able to connect with other humans and have results because of that and have more opportunities, both
Yeah,
internally in a company and also just publicly.
I think you said something that's so relevant and so common, which is feeling that imposter syndrome and responding to it with this desire to be perfect. What's so interesting about it to me is that it always ends up the same way, which is that people end up feeling divorced from themselves. And I think it reinforces this underlying belief that who I am isn't good enough, right? Even though who I am got me this opportunity, or maybe they think they got the opportunity by performing this perfection, and so they can't stop now because if they stop, people will realize they aren't actually worthy of it, right? Was there a moment in your career where that perfection became unsustainable for you, where performing just divorced you from yourself too much?
It's funny you say that. So I had an executive coach who gave me this like phrase that sticks visually in my head, and it was like PERF. So like perf leads either to performance or perfection. And you get to choose like which path you want to follow that word. And so I was put in this situation very last minute. I was running this generative AI eco mission, they called it at Square, where the head of Square said, hey, all the teams in the company need to launch a feature by the end of the year, like disrupt your annual plan. For a big company, this is a crazy, crazy concept to totally upend everyone's annual plans. Throw out the playbook. 32, different features were supposed to be shipped in like 6 months. It was before anyone even knew anything about generative AI. And we had no like legal or data protocol. We really had to figure out like so many foundational things. And she was like, Katie, you're in charge of getting every single one of these teams to ship their feature by the end of the year. Like, amazing career opportunity. And do you want to talk about like imposter syndrome? We had people in the team who PhDs in AI, like people who were so qualified to lead the org when it came to AI. But I was put in the position, right? And so if I probably followed that perfectionist tendency, I was never going to be perfect at that job. There was just no way that I was going to be the perfect person. But if I followed that path that I kind of was thinking of, it's like, okay, not perfection, but I'm going to follow performance. The goal is to like get the teams to all figure out how to actually use AI and ship a feature by the end of the year. And actually just me being who I was and showing up and having conversations and learning about different people's challenges and like motivating them 100% got the job done. And like we did it, but it didn't make me feel perfect. It challenged every way that I was viewing myself and how I was showing up because I didn't have time to be perfect. But the end result, really leaned into that performance aspect of it. And so, yeah, I've had that a number of times, but that one was a heightened example of like, okay, this is such a tough, tall task that if I lean on perfectionism, like I will fail. There's 100% chance that I will fail. And so I just need to constantly be optimizing for like the overall performance of what we're trying to do rather than making myself look good. And
Yeah.
honestly, ultimately by optimizing for that one, I think I probably looked better than if I would have tried to optimize for perfection.
Was that something that felt like you showing up as yourself, or what did it mean to show up as yourself more in your role as a leader?
I think there's this tension between thinking that showing up as yourself isn't gonna be uncomfortable. And
Mm.
so trying to think about like that moment, I was both showing up as myself, but I was extremely uncomfortable. Those types of experiences ladder up to be how I can be really authentic in today's moment because I've gone through those experiences. I think when you have these like experiences that start to tally up, these micro moments of where I showed up really authentic together, even if uncomfortable, is now how I know how to lead and how to show up more authentically. So I don't know if that explains it, but leaning into the discomfort, knowing that can still be authentic, even if you're not comfortable.
I want to dig into this a little bit more because I think that it really resonates. And I would love to hear if you could think of any examples of where you felt tension being yourself, where you felt that vulnerability and discomfort. What were some of those micro moments that you had to build up in order to feel okay about it?
I'm sure we've all been through those moments where you rewrite a Slack message 600 times.
Yes.
And then as the person consuming the Slack message, like they're not reading it even one full time. They're like scanning it for the thing that's relevant for them. And they're like, okay. And so
That's the
I
brutal
think,
truth.
right? You're like really, really trying to make sure it's perfect, only to have the people on the other end really not care if it's perfect. So I think in those types of instances where you're like, you want to You want to make sure you're representing a lot of people. You want to make sure you're doing like the whole of the project justice. And I feel this about like my regular role as well. But you also want to know that like you're just a person sharing an update to a bunch of people, and the reps of the number of times you share those updates, and you can care just a little bit less if it's like perfectly worded or if there's, a missing period. Those sorts of things I think like I look at as a signal for if I'm feeling like safe and authentic in how I'm showing up, is like, how many times did I reread that message? Like, do I trust myself enough, and do I trust the team that's receiving that, or even the public enough to know that like, if that doesn't go well, it's not the end of the world. And so that might be like a signal that I look at a lot of times. Like, how much do you need to prep for something to have an honest conversation? How much do you need to reread that email? If you're on the 50th time, I think it's like time to say, okay, we got to trust ourselves a little bit more.
You know that moment when the one person who knows how everything works suddenly doesn't work there anymore? Your go-to person is gone, and no one seems to know how to use one of your critical platforms. It happens. GNW Consulting can step in when your team hits that kind of gap. They keep things running while you figure out the next move, whether that's backfiling, rethinking the stack, or just getting your footing again. They've got the skills, the calm, and the context to make transitions feel a lot less stressful. Plus, they're a big supporter of Wednesday Women and the way we amplify women execs authentically. So check out GNWconsulting.com to learn how they can support teams during pivotal moments and make life easier for modern marketing orgs. I think rewriting the Slack message is a great example because we've all done it. We've all rewritten the email or the text message. We've all practiced the phone call or the negotiation. And how many times is it something that feels emotionally high stakes to us? And so we're just going to bed rehearsing how we're going to exist at work the next morning. I think that's so relatable. And it feels ironic to say that you're going to be more successful by caring less. But I don't think it's about caring less. I think it's just about relaxing into who you are and how you handle things and being okay with the fact that, hey, like, I can still have performance. I can still be accepted. I can still communicate if I am my imperfect self.
Totally. I think also just doing a gut check and asking yourself the question, like, am I doing this to protect my image or to move the team forward?
I was just having a conversation with someone in my network earlier today, and we were talking about this phenomenon that happens for women as they get older as leaders. And I think a lot of the time, people believe, especially women believe that they get the opportunities that they have by being perfect. And being perfect means conforming themselves to someone else's expectations, whether they're reasonable or not, whether they're sustainable or not. And so there's this way that as they get older, I mean, let's be real, we live in patriarchy, we live in capitalism, we devalue women as they get older. There's this way that when someone decides that they like aren't as worth paying attention to as they age in their career, they internalize that and believe that they are invisible. I think that's why I really admire what you're doing and what so many of our guests on the season are doing, is because it's maintaining, the innate value of what we know and what we do, and that we deserve to have a voice. So something that I'm really curious about from your experience is how having, a personal brand or a reputation, however you want to put that, inside the company, how do you think that's influenced your ability to, maintain your sense of innate value, but also have a voice that people respect in those conversations where you're making hard decisions?
It's a really good question. And I think it applies equally internally as I think it does like externally. But I've always been a talker. When I was younger, some kids want to play. I really wanted to talk with adults. And so some people are like, how did you get a voice, or how did you start talking and feeling comfortable with your voice? For me, I think that was really natural. I wanted to talk from the beginning. But I had a hard time figuring out like how much I could authoritatively say. So like not just facilitating a conversation, but having an opinion and taking a stance. I think women a lot of times want to like have all the information before they want to say this is what I believe, this is what we should do. Whereas, and this is stereotypically, but like a man might come in and say like, nope, this is the right answer. And so one thing that I've tried to figure out is like, how do I have a voice that feels authentic? It feels like I'm showing up with enough substance that people trust it, enough empathy that people see that I kind of value their point of view, but also enough leadership and directiveness to say, like, this is how we're going to proceed. And kind of balancing those three pieces together. Like, I'm thinking about this on the fly, but like, one, the substance. Do you understand the content and are you, knowledgeable? Two, empathetic. Like, do you understand the different points of view in the room and why there could be different cases for things? And three, like directive, because as a leader, you need someone to make the call and you need someone to have like a stance and put something out there. And so trying to find that like triad balance as a leader and how you communicate and how you have a brand that stands for something where people are like, okay, we can ask Katie a question, we can get an answer, and she can, help drive a result. I think about that a lot in my personal brand, like both reputationally inside is like, do people think that I have the right balance of those three things? You don't want to have no substance, but just really strong opinions and telling everyone what to do. And you don't want to wait till you have all the substance before you tell someone what to do. And so I think about that balance a lot, especially for women, and making sure that it's not too out of whack. Usually for me, I have to force myself to be more directive before I'm ready to make that balance actually what I think the regular person might think it should be.
That's fascinating. I think a lot of people feel that same struggle, but having a framework to help yourself be accountable for doing the best that you can while not overthinking it and putting too much pressure on it is a really wonderful thing, especially because figuring out how to be yourself, that can be just like a bottomless rabbit hole of esoteric exploration and, we need to get things done. So that's not always exactly conducive to being a leader. I'm curious, as you have solidified these frameworks for yourselves and you've settled on what it means to be yourself and you develop this reputation, how do you think people respond to you differently?
I think people are willing to invite you into more conversations, especially in a place where there's not all the right information. I saw something, I will not quote where it's from because I will butcher it, but it was talking about how like in the future with AI, if you're not the one invited to a brainstorm, like you're in trouble. And so I view myself very much as like I want people to invite me to the brainstorm where like not everything is perfect, but you're a good voice to represent a group of people or to think through creatively like how to solve something. And so I think it's served me really well in being able to like process information, have an opinion, bring in other people's opinions, and kind of distill those down into something that we can take action on and make sure that I have strong opinions, I could help move things forward, but also like I'm really open to and really interested in learning from other people.
You hit on something a couple of times in this conversation that I think is at a crux of this issue as well, in addition to perfectionism, is this idea that leaders want to be a good representative of their teams, of their companies, right? They represent a lot of people, but they also have to represent themselves. So I'm curious about advice that you might have for a woman leader out there who is kind of sitting at these crossroads and, wants to represent their company and their team well, but also wants to represent themselves and step into leading more authentically. What would you say to them?
I think there's that stage where you're a manager of other people and you're really just representing what, maybe other people think. And I always love building teams of like really strong A players. And so I want them to be better than me. And with that comes, oh, like we should be representing their voices. But I think as I've evolved, like making sure I have my own point of view on maybe at a different altitude, what's happening, but I'm spending my own time researching, learning, developing a point of view, writing. I find that writing really helps clarify a lot of thinking. Like you can think you understand something and then you really write it out into a blog post or a post or something. And you're like, oh, I'm not really there yet in a place where I can share this. And so trying to figure out like, what is that individual contributor track that you want to have that doesn't feel like you're stepping on anyone else's toes, but actually feels like it's additive to the group that you're leading, where they're going to look at you and say, wow, you understand that subject area. It's helping to inform how we're all thinking, and you're kind of up leveling who we are and our voices. I think that's where I find the best balance. It doesn't feel like you're pulling away from your team. Instead, it actually feels like you're your own person. You're a player. They're all players. And you're kind of player coach in a way where like you have some interests yourself. You have some point of views on the industry or a technology or I don't know, some bigger topic. And you're forming those opinions in a way that you can articulate as your own without feeling like you have to constantly be deferential to your team, who also has really exciting, equal opinions on their own work. That balance, I think, is hard, but it's an important one because it gives you your own identity, which I think as a leader, sometimes I've talked to a lot of my female leaders and we'll look around and be like, what is our job? You know, you get that question at the end of the day, you're like,
Yeah.
what do we do? Like they're doing the work, you know, the teams often are doing the work. And so having something you can really lean on that you feel like is yours and your opinion and you've done the research yourself, I think gives you credibility to a team. And it's not you're not a summarizer of information of other people.
I'm really grateful that we've been talking today because some of this sounds like to me, the unique perspective of somebody who's in product leadership, somebody who is really, elbows deep in what's going on with the product, as opposed to other leaders that you might see in the spotlight, like a CEO or a CMO or something like that. You wouldn't necessarily always see someone in product stepping into thought leadership and personal brand and like leading the industry. This is my last question to you. What advice you might have for those folks who see themselves more as like behind the curtain people on stepping into that spotlight?
I think there's such a space for it. I think, building products is such a core part of building companies equal to CMOs. I think maybe a CMO has maybe more natural comfort with like getting out there and understanding the like mechanism to promote content or a business and then relating that to like how they can promote themselves. But I think I've seen so much excitement for product leadership, especially kind of in the age of AI and where we're at, which is how do you lead these cross-functional teams? How do you take this technology and do something really cool with it and meet the market where it's at and figure out how to, ship things in a way that brings value to people without spending too much money? And so there's a huge, huge market. I think if you look at like Lenny's podcast, for example, I have some friends that have been on that. You can just see like that started out as a very niche product leadership podcast and has now turned into like a pretty mainstream product podcast. And I think that's just showing the appetite for maybe people who are behind the scenes building, trying to get out there and explain their process more, because I think it's pretty applicable to a number of different roles and people who are trying to figure out how to grow in their career.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today
Yeah.
and telling us about your experience with all this, because I think it's going to resonate with so many people. And something I really appreciate about you in this conversation is just how practical your advice is and how many of these things people can take into the way that they're thinking about their work every day. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's been great.
Now that we're at the end of today's episode, we hope you reflect on how Katie's story might inspire your own. Are you chasing perfection or performance? And when can you give yourself permission to stop rehearsing and start showing up as your imperfect self? If today's show inspired you to think of an extraordinary woman leader in your life, let her know about the Wednesday Women Executive Membership. It's a safe space for women leaders to tackle any challenge, ask questions, and uplift others. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your ratings help us grow and inspire even more people. Thank you to our Season 2 sponsor, GNW Consulting, to our executive producers, Melissa Moody and Leslie Greenwood, and to our technical producer, Yelena Georgievich, with Kind Media Productions. I'm your host, Ashley Laabs, hoping this small ripple creates a big wave in your life. Until next time.